Welcome everyone to What the Force, and welcome to a new episode of Star Wars Influences, where we deep dive into the primarily cinematic influences on Star Wars. And joining me, as always, is Amy Rakow. Welcome again.
Hello. Thank you for having me again.
So we've covered such things as the Hidden Fortress and the Searchers, and back a long time ago, even though we were trying to get this scheduled beforehand, back when we covered the Searchers, we were like, oh, yes, we are going to cover Flash Gordon. I think it was just so intimidating that it took us a while to get into it, because Flash Gordon himself has a lot of history. You think Star Wars has a lot of history?
A lot. There's a lot of Flash Gordon out there.
There is so much Flash Gordon out there. And it's very interesting because originally Flash Gordon only came about because the newspaper that wanted to publish a new syndication, a new comic, couldn't get the rights to Buck Rogers. And Buck Rogers was only invented and came about as a result of not being able to get the rights to John Carter of Mars by Edgar Rice Burroughs. And if we flash forward in time, Lucas actually was trying to get the rights to Flash Gordon. When denied that, he ended up writing his own story, Star Wars.
Yay for not getting the rights.
Thank you, Edgar Rice Burroughs, and everyone that has denied the rights to creators. And so they have to create their own stuff. I don't know where I was going with that, but here we are. So I'm actually going to play just a little bit of a clip, and it will, in Lucas's own words,
I would say probably the original impetus for the whole thing was I used to watch a serial on television called Adventure Theater, and they had Flash Gordon Conquers the Universe on it, and I used to love that. So I went off and wrote my own space opera.
And at this point in the clip, actually, it starts out and shows Flash Gordon Conquers the Universe, and every episode after the first episode, there's actually a scroll that explains what has happened to this point to our lovable band of characters. And it looks like the Star Wars scroll, like the opening credits. And it's in front of a weird misty mountain. But if you compare them, they're very similar kind of trajectories off into the distance.
Yeah, I think that the scroll is such a from the very beginning, you're like, oh, I see it. Like with so many of the things we've talked about, like the influences are a little bit more subtle or more subjective. But when you watch Flash Gordon, especially this 1940s serial, I watched a lot of the 1930s, like Flash Gordon Space Soldiers, and then I watched the Flash Gordon Conquers Universes, more like 1940s. I watched a lot of that when we were going to be doing this. It hits you over the head immediately with that scroll. Mm-hmm. And then when you think of the Clone Wars, you think that's where he got to do it a little bit more, the idea of this episodic, the story is ongoing, the adventure continues, I think is really a fun idea.
And the version that I watched actually has a voiceover that reads out the scroll at the same time, which is very much like the Clone Wars kind of voiceover, setting the scene. It literally, and then each scroll actually ends on the word "and." So you jump right into the action, and I can see why, mini George Lucas would have been very interested and engaged by this. It's all in black and white. The original, of course, came out in 1936. The serial came out much before that. And this was, I guess, the most recent version that had come out. And there was kind of 3 serials in this group with the same set of actors. This was the Buster Crabbe version, if you're trying to find it, to influence George Lucas.
So I have to say that I was born in 1973, and so I am definitely one of those OT babies, like grew up with the original trilogy. And somehow that 1980 version, which I'm sure we'll talk about at some point, Flash Gordon movie, I just don't remember watching that. Like it kind of escaped me. It was like a little bit of a cultural black hole for me. So I did not grow up loving Flash Gordon. Like I am not a Flash Gordon like aficionado. And so going back and looking at all of this has been extremely delightful because Flash Gordon is so ridiculous. Like in such joyful, like we know we're ridiculous. We're going to be ridiculous. Like enjoy us being really, really ridiculous. Like, I mean, it's hilarious. And it's really impossible to not like immediately just be like Star Wars when you're watching it. You're like, oh, like they have blasters, they have people in capes, like there's an arena, like, you know, like there's an ice world, there's a floating city, like, you know, like it really is interesting where like you feel army,
like the bad army is Mongo is like ruled by an emperor, you know, and
like the people who work for him are like in like the 1930s, like the Space Soldiers serial, his soldiers are wearing so much tin armor that they look like the Tin Man almost from the Wizard of Oz. Like they look ridiculous. They don't look intimidating whatsoever. They look completely ridiculous. But you're like, oh, like, is that one of the ways he thought of like having the stormtroopers being completely armored? Like, is that like, you know, one of the, and in all of the Flash Gordon versions, like the armor just gets more and more absurd, which I'm here for it. Like I'm here for it being absurd. But I think that, you know, to me, Star Wars is escapism. Mm-hmm. Like so much of it is escapism. And I love that young George Lucas saw these and it was so escapism for him because that's what Star Wars was for me at the same age that he was watching these Flash Gordon things. And it wasn't about dialogue and it wasn't about character development so much. It was just more about like huge visuals and excitement and moving around and, you know, faster and more intense, you know, like that's just, you know, like you can really see, you're just like, oh my gosh, like, you know, it's almost like Star Wars is like Flash Gordon fan fiction. Like when he couldn't do like the Flash Gordon thing, he's like, how can I like make Flash Gordon my own? Like, and he, you know, he just like took it and, you know, ran with it. And I think chose some of the more delightful and memorable and exciting kind of elements from it and put it into his own very special and unique myth.
Yeah. What I really noticed that stood out for me, especially from like a story perspective, is that, oh no, what's gone wrong now is very much the driver of the plot, especially in Flash Gordon Conquers the Universe. It's like every time there's a new peril or a new panic or a new thing that the heroes have to get through. They also have like very good relationships that present themselves where they go and try to save each other. And, you know, one person or another is getting into trouble. The lead character is also blonde-haired, blue-eyed Earthman.
Yeah, no, very naive. Like, I'm just going to go in there and I'm going to save the day. You know?
Yeah. And then there's also this very roguish person with a heart of gold who actually turns out to be a prince named Prince Baron, who's his best friend. And in the original story, they actually have like a lion man that hangs out with them that kind of looks like Chewie. Like just, you know, you can like squint and you're like, is this Star Wars? Like, you know, and they have rocket ship fights and they have the blasters and they have people wearing armor and, you know, there's princesses and princes and there's dukes and there's duchesses and there's throne rooms and like there's just this feeling of I don't know, old story but mixed with all of this technology. And to me that is like the biggest parallel that like will just like smack you in the face when you start watching or reading Flash Gordon.
Well, and it's also like Flash Gordon doesn't start the story as a hero. Like he just starts it as a regular guy who's thrown into an adventure, which I think is so appealing.
He's not a regular guy. He's like
well, yeah, I mean, he's a star polo player.
A star polo player in the original version, and then the 1980s version, he's a football player. I mean, they had to update it for the 1980s, but
I think that the idea of like that you're living your life, you know, like they're on a plane. He's on the plane with Dale, who's like one of the main female characters in it, main woman. Cut that out. No, but and like then, you know, like drama happens and then they just end up like meeting the scientists and they kind of get whooshed off to, you know, I think it's an appealing
I don't even think they're
story
together then. They're just like happen to be on the same plane.
Oh yeah, no, like they just like, I think that like she screams or something like that and he's like, oh, I am here to protect you, you know, like, I mean, because everything is just very like overdone.
It's very like fish out of water because they're like just this normal scientist who's like suspects that the world is ending because of these things. This normal jock polo player and this normal woman reporter. Literally, like that's them.
And when they get whisked off to this other world, I think that like that whole idea of like you're living your life and then you get whisked off to like a fantasy world, like that's appealing because like every, you know, especially now, like when, you know, in 2020, like whisk me off, go ahead. But like I've read that a lot of what appealed to George Lucas about it to Flash Gordon as a story is that they were very defined. These are the good guys. These are the bad guys. And like, that's certainly, you know, true in Star Wars, but people do change their allegiances. Like when you kind of get more into the story, you see other people and how they've been kind of manipulated or how they feel like they don't have a choice against this very like dictatorial ruler.
Well, like,
and then
Princess
you kind of
Aura
get into
is the best example of that, right? Like,
you know, it starts off as very like black and white, but then when you get into it, there's more, you know, is more kind of, you know, interesting, but like, I don't want to like overanalyze Flash Gordon because it is just kind of ridiculous, but I mean that in a good way.
Yeah.
But like, you know, what you were talking about before is how like you have like the main world and like, you know, like then that like kind of like has, you know, Tatooine kind of a thing. And then they go to like more of like a frozen world, which, you know, like you can think is Hoth, and then the Hawkmen, which is a whole thing of like these like guys with wings who are flying around who totally remind me of like the monkeys in Wizard of Oz.
Yeah.
I mean, just like an army of like flying people. That was the first thing I thought of when I saw the Hawkmen, I remember. But like they live basically in Bespin. Like it's a floating city. Very interesting where you're just like, wow, like, I mean, it doesn't really mean that he made Bespin because of that floating city, but like he could have. You know, like it certainly seems reasonable.
Yeah. In the frozen world that you mentioned, there's this scene where they're all wearing like basically what looks like the parkas that they wear on Hoth. And I was like, that's interesting. I know parkas are a thing like whenever you're on a cold planet, but these are very specific looking parkas. And then when they're on the kind of desert planet, which I actually wrote down the name too, so I'm going to grab. Yeah, the Land of the Dead. There's actually like a group of people that kind of like look like they could be Tusken Raiders or Sand People. And you're like, okay. You know, what's going on here?
At least one of the versions of Flash Gordon in the frozen world, like Queen Freya is a character and her hair is very kind of Leia-esque. And so I know a lot of people have kind of guessed about that. And I looked at it and I'm like, like kind of like, I wasn't like, so it's hard because like when you watch something looking for Star Wars things, it's very easy to see it. And a lot of it is subjective and you can overthink it and you can draw conclusions that like aren't necessarily there. I think Lucas really like in a lot of cases, like if you think of like what inspired the slave Leia, Hutt Slayer Leia bikini. You know, like you can look at like a dozen properties that had like a woman taken hostage in skimpy outfit, you know, like, and Flash Gordon's one of them, but like there's plenty of others that like, you know, like he could have been looking for. But I do wonder, the Flash Gordon movie came out in 1980 and he has a bit of a speeder bike. And I do wonder if that inspired the speeder bike for Return of the Jedi.
Yeah.
Because like now when I look at it, I can't not make that connection in my head. But we talked about how what's so funny about the 1980 Flash Gordon version is it really seems to prove that there are only really good effects CGI effects if you have ILM, which
Yeah.
I'm assuming, I don't know who did the effects for Flash Gordon in 1980. I'm assuming it's not ILM because they do not hold up whatsoever.
Whereas
but they're still delightful.
Empire Strikes Back still holds up, which is earlier. Yeah. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just Flash Gordon that movie is super, super campy intentionally.
Mm-hmm.
And Star Wars,
it leaned into it.
Star Wars is has ridiculousness in it, which I think you can kind of draw parallels to Flash Gordon, but Star Wars takes itself much more seriously. And Flash Gordon is a world of bright and shiny things.
Mm-hmm.
And Star Wars is the opposite of that.
Yeah. And very Star Wars is very lived in, whereas almost everything in Flash Gordon is more like the prequels. In a way, shiny ships, shiny armor, beautiful outfits, the costuming that they use in almost every version. It's, I think they are using Robin Hood costumes for the 1980s version, and Timothy Dalton is
in some of the earlier serials too. You're wait a minute, is that Errol Flynn? What's going on?
Yeah. It definitely feels like they kind of drew on these certain maybe archetypes in a way. Prince Baron's men are almost the merry men from Robin Hood, in a way.
Absolutely.
They try to rescue people, they're roguish, but they're on the side of good. Maybe a little anti-hero in a way, right? And Flash Gordon leans into those archetypes much like Star Wars does. Good people are dressed a certain way, bad people are dressed a certain way. It leans into that. Did you want to talk about Emperor Ming a little bit and talk about those parallels to Star Wars?
Well, I think that you can look at that character. So first off, there's the cape connection, which I was obsessed with because I was just one of my favorite things about Star Wars is how many capes there are. And so he is a caped bad character. He's just all bad. There's no good. Mm-hmm. He sits in an amazing throne room. He's very quick to throw people into an arena that, has giant creatures, which in one case, the 30s serial was iguanas that were blown up to look, really, really big. But definitely reminded me
just
of
to
the
execute
arena.
them.
Yeah. Just for fun.
Yeah.
But I think it's interesting because you get some Palpatine kind of vibes from him just because of the throne room and or mm-hmm. Snoke, you could say, just because he is just pure evil guy, in his ridiculous outfit. I thought it was, interesting that he had a daughter who clearly immediately breaks away from him because she mm-hmm. wants Flash for herself. And, he does that. So she immediately kind of goes away. And because I think that Star Wars has some interesting family stuff where it's just because you're related to someone doesn't mean that you're going to go their same way. And, there's mm-hmm. with Luke and then with Rey, there's all kinds of, that's kind of a theme that goes throughout there. So that it was interesting that Ming had family, really. I mean, just because I think a lot of times you have the villain and they don't have family right there with them. And I mean, his the daughter Aura is one of my favorite characters, just because she's so ridiculous.
Yeah, she's. I love her as a character because she's this princess who has literally kind of always gotten her way, under her father's rule. She has, I think she has Amazons in the original serial that go hunting for people. So she's got her own crew. And as soon as Flash Gordon shows up, she's he's mine.
Yeah, no, she's well, it's ridiculous really too, where he shows up and she's no, he's mine. And Ming sees Dale and, I mean, literally, I think that there's these ridiculous lines of Dale is here now for my pleasure. And you're whoa, yeah. What's going on here? You're not even suggesting it. You're just saying it out loud. I mean, there's a weird, there's a whole dynamic of I take you, you're mine.
Yeah. It's very much, a dark union type scenario where he's like, I want the Earth Woman. She's unique. And now she's mine and she's in my bedchamber. Like literally that happens.
And I have very sandy sheets and it's all like,
yeah, exactly. And like Dale escapes multiple times and is thrown back in there and he's always trying to possess her. Like that's part of the kind of ever going thing. And so like there's the Earth Woman from home, Dale, and there's Aura, who are both interested in Flash. And I think in the 1980s version, like he like makes out with both of them at different times. And like,
I know, I remember he kisses Aura like while he's like telepathically talking to Dale. And you're just like, oh my gosh, like what is even going on here? I don't know if that happened in like the earlier versions, but
no, it was.
I have to just highly, highly recommend to anyone listening, if you have not seen the 1980 version of Flash Gordon, like do yourself a favor, just, you know, maybe have a couple drinks before you watch it. I don't know, but like, or just go in with a good attitude of like, this is going someplace and just go with it.
It's beyond bizarre to watch. I personally appreciated all the costume design because it was weird.
It's a really like visually fantastical movie
and like funky, and like all of these different groups are very clearly defined. All the different people of Mongo who are on the planet, and like it. We also have Max von Sydow as Emperor Ming, and he's deliciously evil in it. And yeah, it's just like a super enjoyable romp to like watch. And plus, you get to hear Queen's Flash song.
Oh God, which is amazing. Yes. That's the reason why it was so popular in the UK. It was more popular there than it was in the US. I think because of that Queen song, because they had better taste about that.
Yeah. Yeah. It plays like dramatically whenever Flash is like kicking butt. So like whenever he's fighting, you hear Flash, savior of the universe. And you're like, yeah. And you're all pumped up.
Yeah, no, I mean, it works really well. And it like, they do it over and over and over again. And it works equally well every time they do it.
Every time they do it. Yeah.
Well, and I think that, and another one of like the things I wonder, like The Empire Strikes Back, like, I was so young when I saw it that I didn't like overanalyze it like then, but like, it was quite a thing for The Empire Strikes Back to end off on that cliffhanger. Mm-hmm. Like that, like, to end a feature film, like, cause I mean, I think everyone was kind of used to it with TV and soap operas and stuff like that. But I think that like, so much of Flash Gordon was about the cliffhanger, like all of these serials, like that was the thing, is like, you wanted to come back and you wanted to see more, and you wanted, like, it was a never ending story that continued, to delight. And so I think that really was a great way for him, you hear that like Lucas really has enjoyed watching The Mandalorian, and like you almost wonder if like if he was going to dive back, like if he would choose TV so it could be more of an episodic story than a feature film. Like I wonder if that would be more appealing to him, because he, but it's hard to say. I mean, like, who knows?
Yeah, I don't know how much he would I think he just has a different sensibility about storytelling and has leaned into long form so much that like maybe doing like 30-minute long episode might be like, oh, how do I only tell this? I don't know. I don't know. He hasn't directed in so long.
Yeah. And I don't get the feeling that he wants to come back. And like, I'm not like desperate for him to come back or anything like that. But like, it's interesting. Like, I wonder if he kind of has that Mandalorian like joy of like seeing, and, he could easily have that from Kenobi or the Cassian show as well. Of just kind of seeing these more kind of like short little stories that kind of add on.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Sorry, just changing my note area. I did appreciate how classical, and especially in the original serials, the music was. It really stood out and played with the emotion of the scene. it felt appropriate for each scene that it was presented in. Did you notice the music at all, especially in Flash
I
Gordon?
did. And I think that what's interesting is that with Flash Gordon and arguably, I think, A New Hope, the music tells the story more than the dialogue.
Yeah.
And it really like drives like the narrative of what's going forward. And we had talked about, I think before we started recording, how like, you know, it really just was such a visual feast that Flash Gordon was. And like there was so much movement going on and so much action, and the visuals were so amazing, and the locations played such a big role. But I think that when it came to the emotion of the scene, it was much more dependent on the music than what was being said.
Well, and there wasn't a lot of like
screen.
close-ups in the original serial to like people's faces. So like you kind of had to be like, okay, they're all standing together. You can't really tell what they're all like facial expressions are, or what they're putting into things. So like the music, like a silent film, is playing in the background, like accentuating the panic of a moment or the action of a fight where Flash is like fighting somebody, or the drama where they might be discovered. There's a lot of that.
Absolutely. And I think with the music hand in hand was the editing, which also I think, I mean, a lot of people have talked about how the editing of Flash Gordon had a variety of wipes, and not just like a simple wipe, but like, you know, a wipe that was like a lightning bolt, or a wipe that was, like a spiral or something like that. And, that was a huge part of the editing of most of the Star Wars films, is it kind of like, which I think adds kind of a fantasy, a fairy tale, storytelling part to it. I love those wipes. I feel like they really do have an effect on the viewer that like a lot of people don't realize. But like for sure, like you can look like the two main things you'll come away with from Flash Gordon, I think, are the scroll, the wipes, maybe the blasters, but like spaceships, but
chase scenes like rocket ships chasing other rocket ships, and then kind of having a semi-dog fight type thing happening. That happens several times in Flash Gordon Conquers the Universe. So.
Yeah, and I think that there's also like, your ship is giving you problems, this old ship, like, it's like, which is very reminiscent of like the Millennium Falcon, where you're just like, come on, baby, hold together. Come on.
We can't make this work. Oh, it's not working. Oh, now Flash has to drive. Like, it's
When for A New Hope, I think like for Flash Gordon, like, for the most part, like the plot is like Flash and Dale are trying to save Earth.
Yeah.
Like that's it. Like they're trying to, from these evil people. And, like in Star Wars, like they're trying to destroy the Death Star. They're trying to protect the Resistance. Like it's a pretty simple overall goal, which I think is similar, and is, again, just kind of appealing, especially like for things that like, I think that, the more complicated a movie is, like sometimes I don't want to rewatch it as much. Like sometimes it really is the more simple stories that really connect with you emotionally, and you can kind of like pull your own story into. You can look at those characters and think about yourself and like relate to them and relate to the story, and be like, oh yeah, like I want to be that person. I want to go on that adventure. Like it doesn't seem complex. Like you just want to go and do the right thing and be brave and save the girl, and have that other girl kiss you maybe, and like.
Well, he was certainly tempted. But like Aura ends up, I think, with Prince Baron.
They're going to be, because he's the rightful ruler. And so once, Ming gets, dispatched, then they're going to basically lead. And then, Flash and Dale, I don't know if it varies in the different versions, if they go back or if they don't. I've watched so many different like snippets from so many different versions of Flash, because like there's all kinds of cartoons and all kinds of serials and all kinds of movies, a lot of which before A New Hope, many of them after. Like World War II comes into play in several of them.
Like Hitler is working with Ming in one of the versions.
They go to Mars and something else that I didn't watch any of that actually, but there's as you would think with a hero like Flash Gordon, he has many adventures.
Yes, he has so many adventures. And what I like is like somehow Emperor Ming has returned. Happens like a lot.
No one's ever really gone.
No one's ever really gone. And like, can you ever truly kill evil? I guess you can't really kill Emperor Ming either. It's very good. Was there anything else from a like cinematography or from like how they, the action that really stood out for you?
I think that they really paid attention to the world that they created in Flash Gordon. They paid attention to having not like maybe a fully realized set, but they had very interesting things in that set. Like they had very interesting throne room, like a throne. They had very interesting things around, like the props were very interesting. And so they always had something, the costuming, there was always something that was going to draw your eye. And so I feel like they really did a great job of filling the frame with interesting visual things, which I think the Star Wars movies did. And again, I do think that your what you were talking about with like the prequels, especially with the costumes, is really like right on, because I mean, they really like the prequels are so visually stunning when it comes to the decor, and like there's so much attention paid to like the set design and all of that. Like I think that there was a lot of, in both of them, like they seem to really like do a good job of filling the scene with visually attractive things. And I think that with both of them, it was kind of like a bigger the better thing. Like you're not just going to have like a lizard that's like their size coming at them. Like it's going to be like 12 times them. Like it's going to be 12 times them. It's not going to, you're not going to fall down a small little shaft. Like it's a huge shaft. Like everything was just really big and kind of over exaggerated, but like just made it more thrilling.
Yeah. And there's a lot of campy things that come through in the bad guys, I think, that are you're like, oh, this feels familiar when you watch Flash Gordon. Like how stupid the individual Mongo soldiers are. Like, oh, like we got them, and then they shot them down, but they didn't, and, like there's a lot of that like humor, like haha, the heroes got away with it and they tricked them. Like there's a lot of that in Star Wars.
Yeah, and there's the humor of Star Wars is great. The humor of like Flash Gordon, like I would argue that Flash Gordon is funnier just because Flash Gordon is both funny intentionally and you might argue unintentionally. But like they really did just go for their whole like campy thing. But I think that, Lucas was wise to understand the value of humor. And, we talked about that with the Hidden Fortress, like having like the two, C-3PO and R2-D2, like those characters be your narrators and be a source of comic relief, even though when everything was going wrong, like you don't want to just see tragedy, tragedy, tragedy. Like you need those moments of levity to kind of, keep your audience engaged and just still make it, an adventure and not like some sort of trial.
One thing that I noted that Zarkov was very much like C-3PO, because he was always like, estimating, how many people were there, or estimating time to death, or estimate.
That's interesting. Yeah,
he's like the Earth, like running. Hey, this is how much danger we're in, which is what C-3PO does for the audience, right? He lets us know how screwed the audience is, or how screwed the characters are in the situation by letting them know it's really terrible. Like Zarkov always lets everybody know how terrible they are actually off with his, science.
Like, thanks, Zarkov. I'm aware.
Science mumbo jumbo. Like, if you didn't know, this death dust will kill every person on the planet in X amount of time. It's like, okay, thanks for the check-in. But he does very much like fill that role of like informing the audience how bad things are and kind of speaking for the audience in some ways. Like, oh no, we're in trouble. Yeah. Because Flash doesn't really care whether they're in trouble or not.
Yeah, no, I think that Dale is much more aware of like what's going on than Flash is for a lot of times too. Because she's kind of in it, like she's kind of like, you know, I think that an idealized kind of girl next door, but like she can take care of herself, but she enjoys being saved. Like she definitely, like both of the main female characters are kind of like fantasy, like male fantasies in my opinion.
Definitely.
But I still actually enjoy them because neither of them are like useless. Like, I mean, they're not like doormats, like who are just waiting around to be saved. Like they have their own personalities. They have their own strengths. They're doing their own things. But I do think that they're not flat, but they are kind of like, they're not characters that I think as a young girl, I would have identified with all that much. I feel like they were, now when I see them, I kind of, you know, understand them. Like when I was first watching some of the serial, like one of the serials, like I kept on thinking of Dale as being, and I think I told you this earlier, like I really just kept on flashing to Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Like there were several scenes where like I felt like I was seeing like things from that movie in there, and like the Kate Capshaw character of that, like I kind of was like seeing them slightly like as the same, even though they're not. Like I don't know, but there was just something of like, you know, like you can take care of yourself, but you're also like asking for help a lot. Like, you know, like he was one of those interesting dynamics.
I don't know that there's a parallel for Aura specifically in Star Wars. She is such a like sexual being, at least how she's presented in like most of the versions. Like,
right. Yeah, no, totally.
You know, like
that's her role. Like,
she's like very much a temptress for Flash because he's like got his eyes set on Dale. But like she's also like very self-assured of her own power, and the only thing that's really been holding her back is, I think, a little bit of the fear of her father, right? Emperor Ming. And she's kind of awesome because she basically kind of flips as soon as Flash shows up. But like,
I mean, she knows what she wants and she just goes for it.
She just goes for it, which is cool. But I don't think she's ever really like shamed, which is also kind of nice for like doing anything she wants. I kind of like that about her.
Yeah, I think that like that's just who, you know, she, you know, maybe as like had that role as like the princess, like no one really just like questioned her, and she didn't fall into that typical princess like meek, you know, save me kind of role. She had more of like a power role. Like I would imagine that she would think that she would, you know, maybe she's Ventress. I was trying to think if there was any like
is there a comparison?
If Ventress was more sexy, like, you know, she didn't get any like, you know,
yeah.
or Ventress was sexy, let's say it. But like if Ventress talked more about who she, you know, like, you know, who she desired.
I don't know. She talked about Kenobi a lot.
I know. I was like,
yeah, I mean,
there's got to be some Ventress Kenobi fan fiction that really goes along with that. Like,
yeah. Yeah, but like she also like does seem to like Baron too. So there's like this weird like shipping squared that happens. Plus like who I'm sure there was people who were like, yes, that Emperor totally deserves Dale like out there.
Yeah, I think Aura, like she's trying to figure out who she is, like away from her father. Like, and I think that she sees, you know, Flash and Dale arriving as a way to kind of make her, this is it. This is my time to like, step away and break off and be who I want to be.
Yeah. And then like she ends up supporting Prince Baron to like take back the planet from the Emperor, and that's super interesting too. It's I don't know. There's lots of like really interesting things about the story that just resonate from I don't know. I like epics, you know? I like it when the universe is at stake or the galaxy's at stake or the world is at stake. I like that. And like small people or people that you wouldn't expect to come from nowhere and come and save everybody. I kind of like that. That's very
I mean, like with the Hawkmen, like the Hawkmen are aligned with Ming, you know, but then once, you know, Flash and Dale get, you know, like they get thrust in there and like other characters are in there and like they show different allegiances, like then you're kind of like, oh, you're not just like men in wings who fly around with armor, like who are just like, robots who are like, following this like dictator. Like you get to know that, and like you hear their story and they're like, well, it's been this way for so long. But I mean, sometimes, you need someone to come in and shake things up, like, and then really start to root for them, like in a different way.
And there's a lot of like gathering of allies throughout the whole story of Flash Gordon. Like he shows up, he is himself, either passes some sort of trial, like sometimes he has to like fight Baron in some versions to like gain his allegiance, and then suddenly like they're bros for life. Or, he ends up having to like kind of fight or prove or save somebody's life, and then he like I think he saves the Lion Man's life. I forget his name. But and then like the Wookiee life debt, he's now like there, like and so all of these allies, and that's very Star Wars too. Fundamentally, it's like, I'm in there, I passed your test or your trial, or you owe me one, and now we're working together. Or
it's like, I see you, I want to be with you, like, let's do it.
Yeah, like the Hawkmen turning is very much like the Gungans joining Padme, like just proving your worth to them and then joining to fight the bigger battle of the
exactly, totally, yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot of that like common thematic element in Flash Gordon that like, must have resonated quite well with George Lucas's little brain. When he was a mini version of himself. I assume he still wore plaid. I don't think we can, imagine him any other way. But I really appreciate that, like, that was his escapism, to your point. And then like he was like, hey, I don't get this. I can't get the rights to make this myself. So let's build something that's a space opera and a grand adventure. And what would that look like for me? Because like,
we're just so lucky that he couldn't get the rights.
Yeah.
I mean, because I'm sure he would have made a great Flash Gordon, but it just wouldn't have been, it wouldn't have been Star Wars.
And maybe one thing that he learned from Flash Gordon, given the fact that it's sort of a hodgepodge of technology and like fantasy, like everybody's kind of like wearing medieval armor / wearing like these very classical dresses, especially in Conquers the Universe. I'm like, everybody's wearing, like, they rated the studio medieval section for
but
costuming.
Like they're in like rock worlds or ice worlds, like.
Yeah. But then, they also have all these blasters, and it's like this not hodgepodge, but like deliberately putting these different types of things together. And so like much like Star Wars, where we have this science fantasy elements all together, like that's what he achieves in his version too. I think like knowing that he had seen that it could already work, it is inspiring to say, oh, hey, I know it's already worked. I can make it work again.
Yeah, I mean, like it's a timeless tale. Like, if you can come up with your own spin on it, which, like, because I know that some people are like, when they talk about Star Wars and Flash Gordon, they're like, oh, Dale is Leia and Flash is Luke and Baron is Han. And like, you can say that, but like, it's too simplistic. Like, it doesn't always, it doesn't ring as true. It's too easy. Like, and it doesn't really reflect, like, it's not, it's not like George Lucas was copying anything. It's just like, there were various inspirations. And I think that, he'd take from a lot of different things. But I think that the joy of excitement and just, faster, more intense. Like, I mean, like that's, like you're going to get that from Flash Gordon, because Flash Gordon doesn't slow down.
Yeah. It's like they don't really have moments to pause and like think about the fact that they're on this strange planet. It's very funny. So do you think that like the pacing really does carry like similarly to Star Wars?
I think that because from serial to feature film, like there is a huge difference, and like there's just like much more of an arc. And so I think that carries through in sequences, but not the overall narrative. Because like in a feature film, you need moments of respite. You need moments to breathe. You need different, moments. And like, there aren't like, I mean, I can't think of from all the Flash Gordon that I've watched, like there aren't a lot of like establishing shots where you sit there for a little bit, and see the scenery or like sweep through, like it is just really more action. And so I think that it really was more for action sequences than for the story as a whole.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think about how familiar, like now seeing Flash Gordon and the action that happens, how familiar certain sequences in Star Wars, specifically, like just the pacing of them once they get in A New Hope, when they get out of the trash compactor and like the race to get to the ship.
When like the whole like Luke and Leia going over the trench, that's a very Flash Gordon, like,
and I mean, like running after the stormtroopers,
and like the doors closing, and they're like, like they're running out of time, and like, like all of that, like is very like, the style of Flash Gordon, like like they're coming, you got to get out, like what's gonna happen,
the pacing, and then also from like the asteroid belts, or sorry, flying into the asteroid belt and like escaping the oncoming ships where they go and hide, and suddenly they're obscured and they're not seen any longer, like back to what we were saying in the earlier part of the conversation. We escaped danger only to find we're in bigger danger, and there's some sort of monster on this rock that we've landed. Like that also is incredibly serial, like, and Flash Gordon specifically, like, oh, hey, we escaped. Oh no, we're captured. Oh, hey, we escaped. Oh no, we're captured. Like, or now we have to hide. There's a lot of that. And then like Return of the Jedi, the battle in Endor, the palace of like Jabba's palace, like that, like all the weird creatures, like it feels very familiar, but yet also completely different because of the level of camp that is applied to Flash Gordon.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to cover?
I think we've gone over a lot of the things I had kind of noted about it. I find myself like, even though like Flash Gordon is the same story for the most part over and over and over again, like I feel now a little bit hooked. Like I get it. Like I get, why this, why it is so appealing.
Yeah, watching like, I don't know, 4 versions of Flash Gordon and like reading.
I wouldn't recommend that. I would recommend like, I would like to actually sit down and watch like more of like one and just like take it for what it is, rather than, cram your mind with as much Flash Gordon as you can.
I do recommend Flash Gordon Conquers the Universe, but to like watch that, you should really know like the setup. So like the original Flash Gordon, before you watch Flash Gordon Conquers the Universe, but Flash Gordon Conquers the Universe is like the most identifiable with kind of the big things that we mentioned in this episode. Also just watching the 1980s like movie is just pure joy and hilarity. So I highly recommend that as well. Any other recommendations from a version of Flash Gordon? Amy?
Well, I would definitely recommend the 80s version just because it's hilarious. I have not seen any. I know that there's been Flash Gordon since then. I haven't seen any of that. I ended up watching more of the Flash Gordon Space Soldiers, which I think was from the 30s. And I really like that, had like all kinds of like giant iguanas in it with the arena and stuff like that, which I really fell in love with. So I think but that one, you'll note, like, if you notice that one doesn't have the scroll. It just has title cards. And it's the 40s one, the Conquers Universe, that has the actual scroll. So I agree with you that if you're looking for, and I have not seen any of the animated Flash Gordon. There's tons of Flash Gordon. And then there's like the comment, like, there's
what's the 1979 version, the one where they fight the Nazis? and like Ming is working with the Nazis.
Well, and there's a serial where there's where he goes to Mars, and like I mean, so like there's all kinds of stuff to see. But definitely, I think that the one that everyone agrees was the most. If you were looking strictly for what influenced George Lucas probably the most, it is the Conqueror's Universe that was like 1940, which you can see on YouTube for the most part.
Yeah, most of this is available on YouTube if you're interested in catching up and understanding, what was something that super influenced George Lucas. And for the most part, like the heroes always win and there's always a happy ending, which is also kind of nice too.
But if you want to see Timothy Dalton, you've got to watch the 1980 movie.
Yeah, and Max von Sydow being, Emperor Ming and being like truly
and
evil.
Brian Blessed as a Hawkman, which
yeah.
He steals the show, I think.
He does. He trips people, like, even before he helps out Flash so many times. He's got, like, a really good comic, presence on screen. It's super enjoyable. Plus, you get to listen to Queen singing, Flash, savior of the universe. And then it's stuck in your head literally all day afterwards.
Yeah, and that's our gift to you.
Yeah. You're welcome. Well, Amy, this is a lot of fun. It was a very quick rundown of Flash Gordon, but we highly, highly, highly recommend Flash Gordon. It will feel so familiar to you. And many of the parts that we love about Star Wars are super influenced by serials, especially Flash Gordon. So it's a good way to like kind of understand that style. And especially if you're interested in filmmaking and kind of want to understand how to keep the pace of action going, because that's all they did. Amy, where can people find you if they're looking for you and your work online?
So on Twitter, I'm at Amy Rickau, AMYRICHAU. And then I have the website 365starwars.com. And then you can see some of my Star Wars writing at starwars.com.
Thank you, Amy, for coming on the show. And next time that we get together, however long that is for us to prep for these things, will be Casablanca and its influence on Star Wars. So that'll be a lot of fun. Thank you for listening to What the Force. I'm Marie-Claire Gould, your host. Our music is the What the Force theme, orchestral music provided by Christy Carew for What the Force. We have a Patreon at patreon.com/whattheforce. We would like to thank all our Patreons, especially those who are obsessed and love What the Force: Brad, Cheryl Bell, Melody, Night Huntress, In Wild Space, Susan, Felicia, How Rude, Anna Perez, Macau Mom, Neil, James, Joe Allen, and Christian Luca. Make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube or leave a 5-star review on iTunes or other pod apps. It helps others find the show. You can connect with us on Twitter at What the Force Show, What the Force Podcast on Facebook, or at whattheforce.ca, where we have expanded our content to include reviews, metas, and articles. We also have a Discord. Links are in the liner notes. Feel free to reach out and start a conversation. Cheers.